All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today we are diving deep into the code that makes you, well, you. We're talking about genes, the different versions of them, and how all of that adds up to the unique traits we see in every single living thing.
So have you ever really thought about this? You look at two siblings, and yeah, they might have the same laugh or the same hair color, but they're never exact copies, unless they're identical twins, of course. The answer to this little family mystery is buried deep inside our cells, written in the language of genetics.
Okay, so to get to the bottom of this, we first have to talk about the absolute fundamental building block of heredity, and that is, of course, the gene.
So what exactly is a gene? The simplest way to think about it is like a single, very specific instruction. It's a particular stretch of your DNA, and its main job is to hold the code to build something functional. And that something is usually a protein. And proteins, well, they're the tiny workhorses that do pretty much everything in our cells.
You know, to really get a handle on this, let's use an analogy. It helps a ton. Imagine your entire set of DNA, your genome, is like a giant library. Inside that library, you've got recipe books, which are like your chromosomes. So what's a gene? A gene is just one single recipe inside one of those books, a recipe for making something your body needs.
Okay, so if we all have these recipes, why don't we all look the same? I mean, what's the deal with all the variety? Well, that brings us to our next key piece of the puzzle, alleles.
So an allele, it's really just a different flavor of the same gene. That's it. It's created by tiny changes in the DNA sequence, which we call mutations. So pretty much everyone has a gene for eye color, but it's the different alleles of that gene that gives some of us blue eyes and others brown or green.
Let's bring that recipe analogy back, because it works perfectly here. If the gene is the basic recipe for, say, cookies, then the alleles are the little variations on that recipe. You know, like chocolate chip cookies versus oatmeal raisin cookies. They're both cookies, but those different ingredients, those different alleles give you a totally different result. Same exact idea for eye color. Okay, this might look a little technical, but let's walk through a real-world medical example. It really shows you how this works. Take the gene ADCK3. If you inherit two normal alleles, one from each parent, no problem. If you get one normal and one pathogenic or disease-causing allele, you're a carrier, but usually you're perfectly healthy. But if you inherit two copies of that pathogenic allele, that can lead to a condition called cerebellar ataxia. This is a classic example of what's called a recessive trait. It only shows up if both of your alleles are that specific version. It just goes to show how the specific combination you get determines the final observable trait, what scientists call the phenotype.
So that's the what. But how? How does a bunch of letters in our DNA code actually turn into something you can see, like your hair texture, or something you can't, like a medical condition? Well, it turns out there's this really beautiful and elegant biological process that makes it all happen. It's basically a four-step journey from code to reality. First, the master blueprint, the DNA, stays protected inside the cell's nucleus. Then a messenger copy, called mRNA, is made from the gene. That messenger then zips out of the nucleus where its message is read step by step to build a protein. And finally, that protein goes off and does its job. And its function is what ultimately contributes to the trait we can see.
And to get a bit more specific on that protein-building step, check out this quote from a molecular biology text. The key takeaway here is that the code is read in these little three-letter groups called codons. And each codon is a command for one specific building block of a protein, an amino acid. It's like a super precise three-letter language that the cell uses to build everything.
Okay, so we know that different alleles lead to different traits. But that just pushes the question back a step, right? Where do all these different alleles even come from in the first place? Let's look at the engines that create all this amazing genetic variation. So it really boils down to two main drivers. First up is mutation. This is a permanent change in the DNA sequence. This is how brand new alleles are actually created. Then you have recombination. This happens when sperm and egg cells are formed, and it's all about shuffling the alleles you already have into brand new combinations.
And you really can't underestimate the power of just a single typo, a single mutation. A lot of them are harmless, but some can have huge effects. For instance, specific mutations in just one single gene can cause a serious condition known as adult onset sensory motor neuropathy.
It's a powerful reminder of how important each letter in our DNA code really is.
Now, recombination. This one is so important. And the best analogy, honestly, is shuffling a deck of cards. The process, also called crossing over, takes the alleles from a person's parents and just shuffles them all up. It doesn't create new cards, new alleles, but it deals out a completely unique hand to each child. And this is a huge part of the answer to our original question. It's why you and your siblings aren't identical.
Okay, so we've been using some pretty straightforward examples, one gene, one trait. But I have to be honest with you, human genetics is almost never that simple. Most of our traits are way more complex.
Take something like your height or even your skin color. There isn't one gene for that. Nope, these are what we call polygenic traits. That means they're influenced by this huge, complex combination of hundreds, sometimes even thousands of different genes all working together.
And, all this talk about genetic blueprints and codes, it leads to a really big question. Is our fate totally sealed by our genes? Are we just playing out a script that was written for us before we were even born?
And the answer is a resounding no, not at all. Your genes are not your destiny because the environment you live in matters a lot. Take this powerful example from medical research. Some women carry genes that put them at a higher risk for having a baby with a neural tube defect. But a simple environmental factor, taking folic acid supplements, can drastically lower that risk. This is a perfect textbook example of how our environment and our choices can interact with our genes.
Okay, so let's wrap this all up and solve that mystery we started with, once and for all. The gene is the basic recipe. An allele is a specific variation on that recipe. And a trait is the final dish you get, which is cooked up by your specific mix of alleles and, of course, seasoned by your environment. And siblings? They're similar because they're working from the same two family recipe books, their parents. But they're different because recombination shuffles the deck and deals them each a completely unique hand of those recipes.
So we've seen that our genes are this incredibly detailed, dynamic blueprint for life. But what happens when there's a typo in that blueprint, a mistake in the code? Well, you'll have to join us next time to find out as we dive into the fascinating world of mutations. We'll see you then.